Welcome to Mysteries Beneath Earth, and thank you for joining this quiet exploration. Here, curiosity is not rushed, and science is not treated as a race but as a companion for reflection. Perhaps you are listening at the end of a long day, letting your thoughts drift before sleep, or maybe you are simply searching for a different way of seeing the familiar world around you. Wherever you are, I am glad you are here. Tonight, we will follow a question, not one that offers quick answers or neat conclusions, but one that stretches the imagination and invites us to look at the ground beneath our feet with new eyes. The question is simple to ask yet vast in implication. What secrets lie beneath Jurassic Earth? When the Triassic came to an end, the world stood at the edge of renewal and ruin. Life had already endured one of the most devastating mass extinctions in Earth's history, and yet, even through that silence, the planet was preparing for its next act. The air shimmered with heat. The continents, once locked together in a single colossal landmass, began to stretch and tear apart. Deep cracks opened in the crust, releasing fire from beneath. The land itself seemed alive, restless, shifting under a force that no creature could see but every creature would come to feel. This was the threshold of the Jurassic, a new chapter in the story of life. If you could have stood there, on the newborn edges of a continent, the air would have carried the scent of ash and salt. Lava flowed in places where forests once grew, and the oceans crept inland, flooding the lowlands with warm, shallow seas. The earth was hot, not in the way a summer's day feels, but in the deep planetary sense of warmth, as if the whole crust were feverish. Yet even in that turmoil, life did not retreat. It surged forward. Plants began to reclaim the land, coating volcanic plains with green. Ferns, cycads, and conifers spread, their roots weaving through black rock still warm from eruptions. Wherever light and water met, something began to grow again. The survivors of the Triassic extinction, those small, unassuming species that had endured fire and hunger, became the architects of the Jurassic world. From these humble beginnings, new creatures rose. Reptiles that had once scurried between rocks evolved into the first great lineages of dinosaurs. In the seas, fish and marine reptiles adapted to the newly warming waters. Life was reorganizing itself, not with haste but with purpose, exploring every niche the planet reopened. The skies too were changing. The air was thick with moisture, heavy but alive with energy. Rain fell often, and with it came thunder. Lightning flashed across endless coasts, striking oceans that steamed under the heat. The first hints of modern climate systems began here. Monsoons, seasonal shifts, vast circulations of air and water. For the first time, the world felt like a single, breathing organism, with clouds as its pulse and rivers as its veins. The supercontinent Pangaea was splitting apart, a slow but unstoppable division. Imagine that, a landmass so massive that it spanned nearly from pole to pole, now stretching and cracking along fiery seams. Over millions of years, that fracture would create new oceans, first narrow channels, then wide basins that became the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. But in these early Jurassic days, the process had just begun. Where continents pulled apart, volcanoes roared to life. The air shimmered with volcanic haze. Carbon dioxide thickened the atmosphere, trapping heat and transforming Earth into a greenhouse planet. The warmth spread everywhere, melting what little ice remained at the poles, raising sea levels, and turning dry lands into humid jungles. And this world of warmth and rain, the stage was set for a new era of abundance. Forests climbed mountainsides, ferns carpeted floodplains. Every corner of the planet seemed to invite life to expand. Insects evolved alongside plants, taking to the air in greater numbers than ever before. The buzzing of wings became part of the world's background music, an early echo of the ecosystems that would one day hum with bees and butterflies. And in this flourishing cradle, dinosaurs began to rise, not yet the giants of popular imagination, but creatures in transition. Some were small, feathered, and quick, darting through the undergrowth. Others grew larger, their bones light but strong, built for movement. The earliest sauropods, ancestors of those colossal neck giants that would one day shake the earth, began to appear. They fed on soft vegetation, their size protecting them from smaller predators. Meanwhile, theropods, the swift, two-legged hunters, honed the instincts that would define their lineage for millions of years. These were the first outlines of the world to come, drawn not in ink or stone, but in life itself. If you could walk through those early Jurassic forests, the ground would feel alive beneath you. The soil, rich with decay and moisture, would cling to your feet. The air would hum with unseen wings. Somewhere in the distance, the call of an animal, not yet bird, not fully reptile, would echo strange and haunting. You'd see rivers winding through dense greenery, carrying ash from distant eruptions downstream. The water, tinted with minerals, would shimmer with an oily rainbow sheen. Every sense would tell you that the earth was awake, restless, still shaping itself. And under that surface, deep within the crust, the planet's heartbeat continued. Magma chambers pulsed, plates shifted, the continents groaned as they moved. It's easy to think of Earth as stable, but in deep time, stability is an illusion. The world beneath our feet is always changing, always becoming something new. The Jurassic was not a static paradise. It was dynamic, filled with creation and destruction intertwined. The oceans, too, told their own story. As the continents separated, seawater filled the widening gaps, creating shallow, sunlit basins. Coral reefs spread through these warm waters, teeming with early marine life. Ammonites, coiled-shelled cephalopods, drifted gracefully, their tentacles waving as they hunted small prey. Ichthyosaurs, sleek and fast like dolphins, sliced through the waves, their eyes large and reflective, adapted for hunting in dim light. Plesiosaurs moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their long necks curving through the water like serpents. These seas were alive, shimmering with motion and light. Above the surface, the air was never quiet. The soundscape of the Jurassic would have been a blend of roars, chirps, hisses, and rustling leaves. Wind moving through conifers would create a soft, endless whisper. Insects droned. Rain fell in heavy curtains. Thunder rolled in the distance. At night, the stars burned brighter than you can imagine. No artificial light to dim them, only the vast silence of an unspoiled world. And yet, within all this raw beauty, life was fragile. Every storm could reshape a landscape. Every eruption could bury forests and choke rivers. Survival depended on adaptability, on the quiet, persistent ability to change. That, more than any single creature or event, defined the beginning of the Jurassic. It was not the age of dominance. It was the age of persistence, of renewal after loss. To imagine the start of the Jurassic is to feel the pulse of recovery after disaster. It is the story of a planet that refused to remain silent after extinction, a world that rebuilt itself piece by piece until it was once again full of motion and sound. And as the ages unfolded, this restless, creative energy would only grow stronger. Mountains would rise higher, forests denser, and creatures larger. The seeds of everything yet to come from the giants of the land to the birds of the sky, were planted here. In this beginning, the world did not simply recover. It transformed. In the centuries that followed the dawn of the Jurassic, life began to bloom with an intensity the planet had not seen in tens of millions of years. The scars left by volcanic fire were softened by moss and root. Rivers carved new paths through cooling rock. Valleys that once echoed with the silence of extinction now resonated with the voices of living things. The earth, newly warm and wet, had become a cradle for imagination itself. Forests rose high and wide, stretching across continents. The air was dense with oxygen, heavy with scent, resin, rain, and soil. Conifers dominated the highlands, their needles whispering endlessly in the wind. In the lowlands, cycads stood like green sentinels, their crowns spreading wide to catch the sun. Beneath their shade, ferns unfurled in spirals, weaving carpets of green across the forest floor. Light filtered through the canopy in golden shafts, and in that glow, evolution found endless possibilities. Everywhere there was motion. Small creatures darted between roots and rocks. Early mammals, no larger than mice, quiet survivors of the ancient cataclysms. Their fur was thin but functional, their senses sharp. They moved mostly at night, hiding from the new lords of the day. The dinosaurs. By this time, the dinosaurs had grown confident. They were no longer fragile experiments of nature. They had become its architects. In the open plains, herds of long-necked sauropods grazed slowly, their colossal bodies rising like moving towers above the ferns. Their steps shook the ground, yet their movements were calm, almost graceful. They fed not in competition but in rhythm, sweeping their necks across the greenery like pendulums of living time. Predators watched from the shadows, lean, muscular, eyes sharp and patient. The theropods had diversified, their forms adapting to every hunt. Some stalked in silence, others sprinted in bursts of speed that blurred the line between animal and storm. Their intelligence was growing too. They began to coordinate to sense opportunity and weakness. For the first time, the act of hunting became something more than instinct. It became strategy. The balance between predator and prey was delicate, but it was also creative. Each adaptation in one lineage inspired a counter-adaptation in another. As sauropods grew larger, predators grew faster, more cunning. As forests thickened, herbivores evolved longer necks to reach high branches. The world had entered a great biological dialogue, a conversation written in bone and breath. And high above it all, the skies were alive. Pterosaurs, the rulers of the air, expanded their reign. Some were small as crows, others had wingspans wider than a room. They glided over coasts, their cries echoing through the humid air. Their wings, thin and translucent, caught the sunlight like sheets of fire. From above, they watched the endless green spread below them, forests stretching to the horizon, rivers glimmering like silver veins. The seas, too, had become kingdoms of abundance. Coral reefs glowed in shallow waters, homes to fish with armor-like scales and colors the human eye could scarcely imagine. Ammonites spiraled gracefully through the depths, their shells patterned with delicate ridges that mirrored the geometry of galaxies. Every wave carried life: plankton, algae, small crustaceans, a living soup that fed an entire web of creatures. Deeper down, in the cooler shadows, predators hunted. Ichthyosaurs swam like living torpedoes, sleek and silent. Plesiosaurs drifted through the water, long necks weaving among shoals of fish. They were not monsters but artists of motion, perfectly adapted to the liquid world they ruled. The oceans during the mid-Jurassic were places of beauty, not fear, vast, shimmering tapestries where sunlight and movement danced together endlessly, and beneath it all, the Earth continued its slow work of transformation. The continents kept drifting apart, carried by the invisible flow of mantle beneath. Each shift changed the climate, the winds, the tides. Where land split, new coastlines appeared. Where oceans widened, new currents formed. These movements were imperceptible to the creatures living atop them, yet they shaped every breath, every migration, every birth. It is humbling to imagine this. A planet that seems eternal, yet never ceases to move. Mountains rose where there had been plains. Islands emerged from volcanic fire, only to sink again beneath the waves. Everything that lived did so upon shifting ground, under skies that never repeated the same pattern twice. As the Jurassic progressed, the planet found a rare kind of balance. Warmth and rainfall combined to create a climate of steady abundance. It was not without storms or fire, but it offered predictability, a rhythm life could rely on. This stability allowed species to grow larger, ecosystems to become more complex, and interactions between creatures to form deeper patterns. Some scientists today call this period the Green World, not because it was peaceful, but because it was fertile beyond comprehension. Every ecosystem, from mountain slopes to coral shallows, was bursting with energy. Even decay became part of creation. When trees fell, they did not die alone. Fungi spread through their trunks, breaking them down into soil that fed new growth. The circle of life, which had once been fragile, had become unbreakable. And still, there was wonder in the small things. Insects pollinated primitive flowers. Amphibians croaked in the wetlands at dusk. Tiny mammals crept through the underbrush, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. In their quiet persistence, they carried the seeds of future worlds, of birds, of humans, of all that would come after. The Jurassic was a grand stage, but every role, large or small, mattered. Imagine standing on a hill during that age. Before you stretches an endless horizon, a mosaic of forest, river, and sea. In the distance, a storm gathers, its clouds turning gold and purple in the evening light. You hear the rumble of thunder, the low call of a sauropod heard moving through the valley. The air smells of rain and resin. It feels ancient, yet alive in a way that no modern breath could replicate. This was Earth at its most generous, its most untamed. But even generosity has its limits. Deep beneath the calm surface, the forces of change were stirring again. The same heat that created land would one day reshape it once more. The same tectonic strength that tore Pangaea apart would continue to pull the world into new configurations. Every paradise on this planet, no matter how vast, carries the seeds of its own ending. The Jurassic would be no exception. Yet in that moment, before the next great upheaval, the world flourished. It sang with life. It dreamed in green and blue and gold. The dinosaurs had become kings not through conquest, but through time's quiet approval. The planet had chosen them for now, as its symbols of endurance, strength, and possibility. And above it all, stars burned, silent witnesses to a living world below. The world had grown vast, alive, and impossibly grand. Be why the middle of the Jurassic, life had not only recovered, it had reached a kind of perfection. The forests that once clung shyly to the edges of volcanic plains now spread across entire continents. Rivers braided themselves through valleys rich with green, while mountains rose in slow, patient defiance. The earth was breathing, and its rhythm could be felt in everything. In the shifting of clouds, the rolling of thunder, The pulse of creatures that walked upon its skin.it was the age of giants sauropods. The long-necked titans now ruled the open plains. Their bodies were wonders of biological engineering, vast yet efficient. Each step they took carried the weight of history, and yet they moved with a strange gentleness, as if aware that their power could crush the very ground they depended on. Their necks stretched like bridges between earth and sky, sweeping through canopies of ancient trees. Each mouthful of leaves was a quiet act of creation. Energy moving through time, sunlight turned into life. Standing among them would have been like standing among mountains that could walk. Their skin was textured like stone, patterned with colors that shifted under light and shadow. Some carried ridges down their backs, others small spines or bony plates. Their eyes, large and deep, reflected the calm of beings that feared nothing. Around their feet, smaller dinosaurs scurried, opportunists feeding on fallen fruit, broken twigs, or insects stirred by the giant's movement. Predators were never far away. The theropods of this era were masterpieces of evolution, agile, balanced, and cunning. Some hunted alone, relying on stealth and precision. Others learned to move in loose groups, communicating through subtle gestures, calls, or scents. Their senses were sharp beyond modern imagination. They could track by vibration, detect scent from miles away, and read movement in the faintest flicker of foliage. Among them, creatures like Megalosaurus and Allosaurus began to define a new level of dominance. They were not merely killers. They were sculptors of balance. Each hunt kept the vast ecosystems in motion, preventing stagnation, forcing adaptation. The prey grew smarter, faster, more cautious. The hunters, in turn, became more strategic, their behavior shaped by both instinct and something resembling thought. And then there were the skies, a realm of both freedom and danger. Pterosaurs had evolved into true masters of the wind. With wingspans stretching several meters, they glided effortlessly over coastlines and forests. They nested on cliffs, their young learning early that survival depended on movement. Below them, early birds were beginning to appear, feathered descendants of small theropods, their bodies caught in the transition between reptile and avian. Each feather was a leap of evolution, each flight a whisper of the future. The oceans mirrored this grandeur in their own way. Beneath the surface, ecosystems thrived like living cities. Coral reefs shimmered with color, providing shelter for thousands of species. Ammonites spiraled through the currents, their shells gleaming with iridescent light. Giant marine reptiles, sleek and powerful, patrolled the depths. Some hunted in packs, others alone, their movements silent as thought. If you could stand on a cliff above one of these Jurassic seas, you'd see waves flashing with life, schools of fish shifting like liquid mirrors, shadows of massive creatures moving below. The sun would glint off their scales as if the ocean itself were breathing gold. At night, the water would glow faintly, lit by bioluminescent plankton. A galaxy mirrored on Earth's surface, and always, the planet beneath was changing. The continents continued to drift, stretching the fabric of the world. The Atlantic Ocean widened. New mountain ranges began to rise where plates collided. Volcanoes erupted in distant lands, painting the skies with ash and fire. Yet these were not disasters in the sense we know them. They were acts of creation. The earth was building itself anew, endlessly patient in its work. The climate during this time was generous, warm, stable, nurturing. Rain fell often, feeding lush vegetation. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of growth. In the evenings, mists would roll through the valleys, curling around tree trunks like ghosts of the ancient world. Lightning storms were frequent, and their thunder carried for miles, echoing through canyons where herds gathered to drink. Life responded to this abundance not with chaos, but with elegance. Ecosystems became intricate networks of interaction. Herbivores grazed in rhythms that matched the regrowth of plants. Carnivores hunted in patterns that never depleted their prey. Insects pollinated ancient seed-bearing plants, ensuring the cycle of renewal continued. The balance was never perfect, but it was constant, a kind of living harmony that modern times rarely see. To walk in that world would have been to feel small, but not insignificant. You would sense the pulse of time beneath your feet, in the rumble of distant thunder or the slow creak of trees swaying under their own age. You'd see herds of Diplodocus moving like rivers of flesh, their tails cracking the air like whips when threatened. You'd hear the low, resonant calls they used to stay connected across vast distances, sounds so deep they vibrated through the ground rather than the air. And in the distance, the great predators watched. Allosaurus stood still among ferns, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of opportunity. It did not need to rush. Time was on its side. In this world, every movement was measured, every risk balanced. Even death had rhythm. When a giant fell, entire ecosystems gathered. Scavengers, insects, fungi, all feeding, transforming, giving back. Nothing was wasted. The Jurassic Earth was not simply a collection of creatures. It was an organism in itself. Every storm, every breath, every eruption contributed to a single vast system of renewal. The atmosphere carried not only air but memory, the lingering smoke of volcanoes, the pollen of forests thousands of miles apart, the salt of distant seas. Even then, the planet was connected in ways that defy imagination. There is something strangely human about that, the constant weaving of connection, the endless adaptation. It reminds us that what we call nature is not a backdrop to life. It is life itself, ancient and aware in its own way. The late Jurassic was, in many respects, the peak of this balance. The planet had achieved a harmony between heat and rain, land and sea, predator and prey. But deep below the surface, subtle changes were beginning. Ocean currents shifted. Volcanic activity increased. The slow drift of continents altered global winds. It was nothing sudden, nothing catastrophic, just the quiet turning of another chapter. For now, though, the earth glowed at dusk. The skies blazed with color, oranges fading to violet, the silhouettes of giant creatures moving across the horizon. Stars emerged, reflected in rivers and seas. Forests hummed with life. Every sound, from the chirp of insects to the thunder of distant footsteps, belonged to the same ancient music, and in that moment, for those who could stand still enough to listen, the world felt infinite. Beneath the thunder and the towering forms of the Jurassic, something subtler was always at work. Not everything in that world announced itself with roars or the crash of footsteps. Some of its most extraordinary stories happened in silence, in the invisible exchange between air and leaf, soil and root, tide and moon. Life was not just growing. It was listening. Every forest, every shallow sea, every stretch of fern-covered plain was tuned to a rhythm, one too vast and gentle for the creatures within it to consciously sense, yet powerful enough to shape their fates. The pulse of the planet was not measured in seconds, but in seasons, migrations, and the slow breath of climate. And the heart of those ancient forests, trees did not stand alone. Beneath the soil, networks of fungi stretched in filaments so fine they could thread through grains of sand. These networks, the ancestors of what scientists today call the Wood Wide Web, connected root to root, tree to tree. Through them, information and sustenance flowed. When drought threatened, One cluster of roots might share water with another. When disease approached, chemical signals whispered warnings through the dark. The forest was not merely a crowd of plants. It was a single organism, thinking slowly, dreaming in green, and above, the air carried another kind of message. The leaves released oxygen, tiny offerings to the sky, while the wind returned with carbon dioxide, a trade that had been running, uninterrupted, for hundreds of millions of years. To breathe in that atmosphere was to join an ancient conversation between life and the planet itself. But even the creatures moved to unseen cues. Take the herds of sauropods. To us, they seem like random gatherings of giants, animals walking simply to find food. But their migrations followed precise patterns, mapped not by instinct alone but by the tilt of the earth, the pull of gravity, and the distant tug of the moon. They moved with the rhythm of light. The length of days shifted slightly through the year, guiding them toward regions where food would bloom and water would collect. Their movements created invisible highways across the continent. When they passed, they pressed seeds into the soil with their feet. When they fed, they pruned forests in ways that encouraged regrowth. When they exhaled, they returned carbon to the air. Even their droppings became new ecosystems, swarmed by insects, feeding fungi, nurturing the next wave of life. Every step a note, every breath a beat, and the predators, too, had their own symphony. The Allosaurus, the great hunter of its time, did not simply stalk. It moved in patterns shaped by memory and sound. Scientists believe many of these creatures could vocalize at low frequencies, producing calls that traveled farther than the human ear could detect. Imagine the landscape trembling slightly at dusk as those deep calls rolled across the plains, answering one another, locating allies or rivals across miles of distance. Even the smallest creatures played their part. In the shadows of cycads and ferns, early mammals scurried in quiet networks of their own. They lived in burrows, their worlds confined to the thin layer of soil between air and rock. To them, the booming footsteps of dinosaurs above were like thunder, powerful but distant, part of a life lived on another scale. They survived by tuning themselves to the subtle vibrations of the ground, sensing danger before it appeared. In their hearts, the slow beat of mammalian endurance had begun, a rhythm that would one day carry forward into us. And then there was the sea, the great mirror of rhythm. The tides were stronger then, the moon closer. Twice each day, water rose and fell, shaping coastlines, feeding ecosystems, carving memory into the sand. Many creatures lived their entire lives by that pulse. Some buried themselves when the water receded, waiting in silence. Others rode the returning tide inland, feeding and spawning before retreating again. The oceans were not just habitats. They were clocks. At night, bioluminescent plankton followed this same pattern. They glowed more brightly during rising tides, dimming as the water fell. A shimmer of light synced with the moon's invisible pull. To stand on a Jurassic shore and watch, it would have felt like standing inside a heartbeat too large to comprehend. Above it all, the atmosphere itself was alive with movement. Air currents circled the globe in slow dances. Winds from warm equatorial regions met the cooler air of high latitudes, forming vast systems that carried moisture and life. Storms could stretch for hundreds of kilometers, their lightning visible for hours. And yet, every flash of energy was balanced by calm, a self-correcting rhythm that kept the world in motion without tearing it apart. The earth was not chaos. It was choreography. To think of that now is humbling. How much of what we call balance was born long before humans could name it. Those same systems still move today, altered but not gone. The wind that once passed over the forests of the Jurassic still circles the Earth, carrying traces of that age in its endless circulation. It's easy to imagine that the past is gone, but in truth, it lingers in every breath, every drop of rain, every flicker of sunlight reflected on the sea. The molecules of air you inhale may once have passed through the lungs of a dinosaur, through the leaves of a cycad, through the bubbles rising from an ancient ocean floor. Time, in its deepest sense, does not vanish, it circulates. That's what made the Jurassic world so alive. It wasn't just the scale of its creatures or the greenness of its forests. It was the rhythm, the quiet, patient continuity of life finding its way, moment by moment, across millions of years. There were nights when meteors streaked across the sky, reminders of the cosmos beyond. Creatures might look up, instinctively sensing something vast and unknowable above them. But then they would return to their rhythms, feeding, nesting, breathing, being. The stars were simply another pulse in the larger pattern, a reflection of the same universal order that moved through ocean tides and forest roots. And so, the Jurassic Earth turned, not in silence, but in music. A slow, deep song without words, made of wind and wave, leaf and heartbeat. If you could stand there now and listen long enough, you might realize that nothing essential has changed. The rhythms continue. The instruments are different, but the melody, life striving toward balance, has never stopped playing. It began with a trembling deep beneath the ground, a vibration that rolled outward like a warning whispered through stone. At first it was subtle, the kind of shift that might go unnoticed in the rhythm of daily life. But then the earth opened its voice. Volcanoes erupted in chains, fountains of fire rising into the sky, and with them came clouds of ash so dense they swallowed the sun. Daylight dimmed into a strange half-light, shadows stretching in every direction, and the warmth of the Jurassic greenhouse world was cloaked in a veil of darkness. Imagine standing in a forest of conifers and cycads as the ash began to fall, soft at first like gray snow, then heavier, coating leaves, weighing down branches, muffling the sounds of insects and birds. The air grew thick, harder to breathe, carrying the acrid scent of sulfur and smoke. Creatures lifted their heads, uneasy, their instincts alert to a change they could not understand. The sky, once a canvas of blue, had turned black, and the world beneath it shifted into survival. The oceans too felt the weight of this upheaval. Ash rained down upon their surfaces, spreading like ink across the waves, dimming the light that nourished plankton and corals. Reefs faltered, food chains strained, and yet in the depths, life pressed on. Ichthyosaurs surfaced for air, their sleek bodies cutting through waters that reflected a sky gone strange. Plesiosaurs raised their long necks, eyes glinting in the dim light, while ammonites drifted silently, their coiled shells catching the faint glow that filtered through the haze. Storms gathered above, lightning flashing against the ash clouds, thunder rolling across coastlines where waves crashed harder than before. The earth was restless, and every living thing was caught in its rhythm. On land, the forests bore the brunt of the fallout. Leaves turned gray, streams ran dark, and the once vibrant green world seemed muted, as though painted in shadow. Yet beneath the ash, seeds waited. Ferns, ever resilient, were the first to return, their fronds pushing through the gray blanket with quiet defiance. Conifers followed, their roots digging deep into soil enriched by minerals carried from the Earth's fiery heart. What seemed like devastation was also renewal, a cycle written into the planet's story. Out of destruction came opportunity, and ecosystems reshaped themselves in the quiet aftermath. The creatures that endured carried forward new adaptations, subtle changes that would ripple through generations, shaping the course of evolution in ways unseen at the time. As the days stretched into weeks, the skies began to clear. Winds carried the ash away, rains washed the land clean, and rivers carved fresh paths through softened stone. The sun returned, brighter than ever after its long absence, and with it came warmth, growth, and the steady hum of life resuming. Dinosaurs once again roamed forests that had regrown, their calls echoing through valleys that had been silent. Insects buzzed, birds tested their wings, mammals scurried in the underbrush. The world had been shaken, but it had not been broken. Instead, it had been transformed, its resilience proven once more. But the memory of that darkness lingered. In the rocks, in the layers of ash preserved for millions of years, the story remained. To us, it is a reminder that Earth has always been dynamic, always shifting between creation and destruction, between light and shadow. To those who lived it, it was simply life, another challenge to endure, another rhythm to follow. The day the sky turned black was not the end of the Jurassic, but a chapter within it, a moment when the planet revealed both its fury and its capacity for renewal. And as we drift deeper into this ancient world, we carry with us the understanding that even in the darkest times, life finds a way to continue, to adapt, to rise again beneath the ever-turning sky. Yet the consequences of such upheaval stretched far beyond the immediate. Ecosystems reshaped themselves in ways that would echo for millions of years. Some species vanished, unable to cope with the sudden changes in climate and food supply. Others seized the opportunity, expanding into niches left vacant. Small mammals, often overlooked in the shadow of dinosaurs, found new ways to survive, their adaptability quietly laying the groundwork for futures they could never imagine. Insects diversified, pollinators forming new relationships with plants that had risen from the ash. Even the oceans, though scarred, became laboratories of innovation, where new forms of life tested themselves against shifting currents and altered chemistry. The blackened sky had been a crucible, and from it emerged a world both familiar and transformed. Imagine walking through a forest decades after the eruptions. The ground is rich, dark with minerals, the air heavy with the scent of resin and damp soil. Towering conifers stretch upward, their needles catching the light of a sun that once again shines freely. Ferns carpet the ground, cycads cluster in groves, and here and there, new species of plants begin to appear, subtle hints of the evolutionary experiments sparked by catastrophe. Dinosaurs move through this landscape, some massive and slow, others quick and agile, their calls echoing through the canopy. Life has not only returned, it has flourished, reshaped by the trials it endured. The memory of darkness remains in the rocks, but the living world has chosen growth. And so the story of the Jurassic continued, not as a steady march, but as a rhythm of upheaval and renewal, of destruction and rebirth. The day the sky turned black was a reminder that Earth is never still, that its surface and its life are bound together in cycles that stretch beyond human comprehension. To us, it is a tale preserved in stone, a chapter we can read only in fragments. But to those who lived it, it was simply another turn in the endless dance of survival. And as you let your thoughts drift with this story, perhaps you can feel the same rhythm, the rise and fall, the light and shadow, the endless resilience of life beneath the turning sky. The forests of the Jurassic were not silent cathedrals of green, but living arenas where countless forms of life moved, fed, and adapted beneath the heavy, humid air. Towering conifers stretched upward, their trunks thick and resinous, their needles forming dense canopies that filtered the sunlight into shifting patterns on the forest floor. Beneath them, cycads stood like ancient sentinels, their crown-like tops spreading outward, while ferns carpeted the ground in endless mats of green. In this layered world, creatures of every size found their place. The giants, long-necked sauropods, moved slowly but with a presence that shook the earth, their massive bodies supported by pillar-like legs, their necks sweeping upward to strip leaves from the highest branches. Each step they took left impressions in the soil that would harden into fossils, silent records of their passing. Around them, smaller dinosaurs darted through the undergrowth, quick-footed and alert, their eyes scanning for danger. Some were hunters, their teeth sharp, their movements precise, while others were foragers, nibbling at low plants, always wary of the shadows that might conceal a predator. Above the canopy, the air was alive with wings. The first true birds, descendants of feathered dinosaurs, tested their strength against the wind, their calls sharp and unfamiliar. Pterosaurs, with wingspans that stretched wider than a human could imagine, soared effortlessly, riding the thermals that rose from the warm earth. Some skimmed the surfaces of lakes and rivers, their long jaws snapping up fish, while others nested on cliffs, their cries echoing across the landscape. Insects filled the spaces between, buzzing, clicking, and humming, their presence constant, their roles essential. Dragonflies with wings as wide as a hand darted through shafts of light, while beetles crawled across bark, and early pollinators moved between cycads and ferns, carrying with them the beginnings of relationships that would one day shape entire ecosystems. The rivers and lakes of the Jurassic were no less alive. Crocodile-like reptiles basked on muddy banks, their armored bodies blending with the earth, their eyes watching for the slightest movement. Turtles swam slowly in the shallows, their shells patterned with ridges that caught the light. Fish darted in schools, flashing silver as they turned in unison, while amphibians lurked in the reeds, their calls rising in chorus as dusk approached. The water was a mirror of the sky, reflecting the movements of creatures above and concealing the lives of those below. It was here that many found refuge, and it was here that predators often waited, patient and silent, for the moment to strike. Even the smallest creatures played their part. Tiny mammals, no larger than a mouse, crept through the leaf litter, their sharp senses guiding them through the shadows. They lived in the margins, feeding on insects, seeds, and whatever else they could find, their survival dependent on caution and adaptability. Though insignificant compared to the giants that towered above them, they carried within them the seeds of futures unimaginable, lineages that would one day inherit the earth. Their presence was a reminder that size was not the only measure of success, that resilience and quiet persistence could shape the course of history as surely as strength and power. The nights of the Jurassic were filled with sound. As the sun sank and the air cooled, the forests came alive in a different way. Insects sang in endless rhythms, amphibians called from the water's edge, and the distant footsteps of dinosaurs echoed faintly in the dark. The stars above shone brighter than they do today, the moon closer, its pull on the tides stronger. Under that ancient sky, life continued its endless cycle, feeding, growing, reproducing, and adapting. Each creature, from the smallest insect to the largest sauropod, was part of a web so intricate that even the loss of one thread could ripple outward in ways unseen. And yet, the web held, flexible and enduring, a testament to the resilience of life itself. To imagine this world is to imagine a planet both alien and familiar. The air was thicker, the plants different, the animals unlike anything alive today, and yet the rhythms were the same. Day followed night, seasons shifted, storms came and went, and life moved in response. The Jurassic was not a static picture but a living, breathing world, filled with creatures that did not know they were extraordinary. They lived as we live, within the conditions given to them, adapting to the challenges, seizing the opportunities, and leaving behind traces that would one day tell their story. And as we follow those traces, we are reminded that the Earth has always been a place of change, that every age has its giants and its survivors, its moments of darkness and its moments of renewal, and that life, in all its forms, has always found a way to endure. The Jurassic world was a greenhouse Earth, a planet wrapped in warmth, its atmosphere heavy with moisture, its skies often hazy with clouds that carried rain across vast distances. There were no polar ice caps, no frozen poles to anchor the climate, and so the warmth spread evenly, reaching even into high latitudes where today ice and snow dominate. Imagine walking through such a world, where the air itself felt thicker, more humid, carrying the scent of resin from conifers and the dampness of ferns after rainfall. The seasons were not as sharply divided as they are now. Instead, the planet breathed in long, slow rhythms of wet and dry, of storm and calm. Monsoons swept across the land, drenching forests and filling rivers, while long dry spells tested the resilience of plants and animals alike. Yet life thrived in this balance, adapting to the cycles, finding niches in every corner of the Earth's surface. The forests were unlike those we know today. Grasses had not yet appeared, so the ground was not covered in the familiar green carpets of meadows. Instead, ferns spread wide, their fronds overlapping in dense mats, while cycads rose like living sculptures, their stout trunks crowned with spirals of stiff leaves. Conifers dominated the canopy, their tall trunks reaching skyward, their needles forming dense curtains of green. These trees were the architects of the Jurassic landscape, shaping the light that filtered to the forest floor, providing food and shelter for countless creatures. In some regions, ginkgo trees spread their fan-shaped leaves, a lineage so ancient that their descendants still survive today, living fossils that carry the memory of this distant age. The air was alive with the sounds of insects, the rustle of reptiles moving through undergrowth, the distant calls of dinosaurs echoing through the canopy. Each plant, each tree, each fern was part of a cycle that sustained the giants and the small alike. The rivers that wound through these forests were swollen with rain, their currents carrying nutrients from volcanic soils into lakes and seas. Along their banks, horsetails grew in thick stands, their jointed stems rising like green columns, while amphibians lurked in the shallows, their eyes just above the surface, waiting for prey. Crocodile-like reptiles basked on muddy shores, their armored bodies blending with the earth, their patience endless. In the water, fish darted in schools, flashing silver as they turned, while turtles paddled slowly, their shells patterned with ridges that caught the light. These waterways were lifelines, connecting ecosystems, carrying life from one region to another, shaping migration patterns and feeding cycles. The climate itself was a force of creation and destruction. Volcanic eruptions sent ash into the skies, dimming the sun, cooling the air for months or years before warmth returned. These disruptions tested the resilience of ecosystems, forcing plants and animals to adapt or perish. Yet each time, life returned, often stronger, more diverse, more intricate. The Earth was not static. It was a restless stage, and the creatures of the Jurassic were both actors and audience in its endless play. Storms were frequent, their thunder rolling across open plains, their rains drenching forests, their winds bending trees. Lightning struck, igniting fires that swept through dry undergrowth, clearing space for new growth. In the aftermath, ferns were the first to return, their spores carried on the wind, their fronds unfurling in defiance of destruction. Behind them came cycads and conifers, reclaiming the land, reshaping the forest. This cycle of fire and renewal was as much a part of the Jurassic as the dinosaurs themselves, a reminder that life and death were intertwined, that endings were also beginnings. The air carried more carbon dioxide than today, feeding the growth of plants, making forests lush and expansive. This abundance of vegetation supported the giants, the sauropods whose long necks swept through the canopy, stripping branches of leaves. Their sheer size was possible only because the earth itself provided such richness, such endless supplies of food. And yet, even as they fed, they shaped the forests, their movements opening clearings, their dung fertilizing the soil, their very presence part of the cycle that sustained the world. Smaller herbivores fed on lower plants, their nibbling keeping ferns in check, while predators stalked them, their sharp eyes and sharper teeth honed by the need to survive. Each creature was part of a balance, each action a thread in the web of life. The oceans mirrored this abundance. Warm and shallow seas spread across continental shelves, their waters rich with nutrients, their reefs alive with sponges, mollusks, and corals. Marine reptiles hunted in these waters, their sleek bodies cutting through currents, their presence shaping the lives of fish and invertebrates. The tides, pulled higher by a moon closer than today, reshaped coastlines, creating lagoons and estuaries where life flourished in abundance. These coastal zones were nurseries, places where young creatures could grow before venturing into the open sea. The climate of the Jurassic was not gentle, but it was generous. It demanded adaptation, but it rewarded resilience. It tested life with storms, with droughts, with eruptions, but it also offered warmth, abundance, and opportunity. The creatures of this age did not merely endure. They thrived, filling every niche, exploring every possibility, shaping a world that was both alien and familiar. To imagine this world is to imagine a planet alive in every sense, a planet where the air was heavy with growth, where the forests whispered with movement, where the seas sang with life. It was a world of cycles, of rhythms, of endless change, and yet within that change was continuity, the same patterns that still shape our world today. The sun rose and set, the rains came and went, the stars filled the night sky, and life moved in response. The Jurassic was not just an age of giants. It was an age of balance, of resilience, of adaptation. It was a reminder that the Earth has always been dynamic, that stability is an illusion, that change is the only constant. And as we let our thoughts drift into that ancient world, we can feel the same rhythms that still guide us now, the same cycles of light and dark, of growth and decay, of challenge and renewal. The Jurassic was not a distant dream. It was a chapter in the same story we are still living, a story written in stone and sky, in forests and oceans, in the endless persistence of life beneath the turning heavens. The forests and plains of the Jurassic were not only havens of greenery and calm, but also stages of constant tension, where every movement carried the weight of survival. Predators stalked the land with senses sharpened by millions of years of adaptation, their bodies honed for speed, stealth, and power. Among them were the great theropods, bipedal hunters whose very presence shaped the behavior of every creature around them. Some were massive, their jaws lined with serrated teeth, their strides long and purposeful, their eyes fixed on prey that could outweigh them many times over. Others were smaller, quick-footed, and cunning, darting through undergrowth in coordinated bursts, relying on agility rather than brute strength. To imagine walking through such a world is to imagine a landscape alive with tension, where the rustle of leaves might signal nothing more than wind, or it might be the approach of something lethal. Herbivores, though immense, were never safe. The long-necked sauropods, whose size alone offered some protection, still bore the scars of predator attacks, their tails swinging like whips to deter would-be hunters. Stegosaurs, with their armored plates and spiked tails, were living fortresses, yet even they had to remain vigilant, for hunger drove predators to attempt the impossible. Smaller plant eaters, nimble and alert, relied on speed and awareness, their survival tied to their ability to sense danger before it struck. The balance was delicate, a constant negotiation between hunter and hunted, each shaping the other in an endless evolutionary dialogue. The skies, too, were part of this drama. Pterosaurs, though often thought of as gentle gliders, were predators in their own right, swooping down to snatch fish from rivers or small creatures from the ground. Their wings cast fleeting shadows that sent ripples of alarm through the undergrowth. Early birds, feathered and sharp-eyed, hunted insects and small reptiles, their calls echoing through the canopy as they staked their claim to the air. Even the waters were not free from danger. Crocodile-like reptiles lurked at the edges of lakes and rivers, their eyes just above the surface, their bodies still as stone until the moment of attack. Fish-eating dinosaurs waded into shallows, their jaws snapping shut on unsuspecting prey, while marine reptiles patrolled the seas, their sleek forms cutting through currents in pursuit of ammonites, fish, and one another. Yet within this constant struggle, there was balance. Predators did not always succeed. Hunger was as much a part of their lives as the thrill of the hunt. Prey animals, though often victims, were not defenseless. Their adaptations, armor, speed, camouflage, vigilance, were as much a triumph of evolution as the claws and teeth of their hunters. The cycle of life and death was not cruel in the way we might imagine it, but necessary. Each loss feeding the soil, each survival ensuring the continuation of lineages that would stretch across ages. The Jurassic was not a world of endless violence, but of equilibrium, where every creature, predator and prey alike, played a role in sustaining the whole. At night, the balance shifted again. The cover of darkness favored some and hindered others. Smaller predators prowled under the stars, their senses tuned to the faintest sound, the slightest movement. Mammals, though tiny, emerged from hiding to forage, their sharp noses guiding them to insects and seeds. Insects themselves filled the night with sound, their rhythms masking the approach of hunters, their abundance feeding countless mouths. The moon, closer then, cast brighter light, pulling tides higher, shaping the movements of creatures along coasts and rivers. Under its glow, the world was alive with motion, each creature navigating the fine line between survival and loss. To imagine this world is to imagine a planet where every life was part of a larger story, where the drama of predator and prey was not an exception but the rule, woven into the very fabric of existence. The Jurassic was not only the age of giants but the age of relationships, of interactions that defined the shape of ecosystems, of struggles that drove adaptation and change. It was a reminder that life has always been a dialogue between forces, that survival is never guaranteed, and that the beauty of the natural world lies not only in its abundance but in its resilience, in the way it endures through challenge, through danger, through the endless turning of time. The sky above the Jurassic world was not merely a backdrop but a living presence, a canvas of light and shadow that shaped the rhythms of every creature below. The sun, warmer and more constant than in later ages, poured its energy into forests and seas, driving the growth of plants and fueling the abundance of life. Clouds gathered in towering forms, heavy with moisture, their shadows sweeping across plains where herds of dinosaurs moved in slow procession. When storms came, they came with force, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rolling across valleys, rain falling in sheets that turned rivers into torrents. Yet when the storms passed, the air was fresh, the forests glistened, and the cycle of growth began anew. Above it all, the moon hung closer than it does today, its pull on the ocean stronger, its glow brighter in the night. Tides rose higher, reshaping coastlines, creating lagoons and estuaries where life flourished. To stand on a Jurassic shore at night would be to see the moon reflected in waters alive with movement, to hear the calls of creatures carried on the wind, to feel the planet itself breathing in rhythm with the heavens. The stars, too, told their stories. Constellations familiar to us were shifted, their positions altered by the slow drift of time, yet their light still pierced the darkness, guiding migrations, marking the passage of seasons. For the creatures of the Jurassic, the stars were not symbols but silent companions, their presence constant, their influence subtle. The night sky was brighter then, less veiled by atmosphere, more immediate in its clarity. To look upward was to see eternity, to feel the vastness of time stretching beyond comprehension. And beneath that sky, life continued its endless cycles, each creature unaware of the cosmic stage upon which it played its part. The interplay between sky and earth was constant. The warmth of the sun drove photosynthesis, feeding the forests that sustained the giants. The pull of the moon shaped the tides that nourished the seas. The storms redistributed water, carving rivers, filling lakes, renewing soils. Even the volcanic eruptions that darkened the skies for months or years were part of this dialogue, their ash enriching the land, their gases altering the climate, their fire both destructive and creative. The sky was not separate from the earth but part of it, a partner in the shaping of landscapes, a force that guided the rhythms of life. For the creatures of the Jurassic, these rhythms were everything. Dinosaurs rose with the sun, fed in the warmth of day, rested in the cool of evening. Pterosaurs soared on thermals created by the sun's heat, their wings stretched wide against the blue. Nocturnal hunters prowled under the moon, their senses tuned to the faintest sound, their movements guided by starlight. The cycles of light and dark, of storm and calm, of warmth and coolness, were the framework within which life unfolded. To them, it was not extraordinary. It was simply the way of the world. To us, it is a reminder that even in an age so distant, the same forces that shape our lives today were at work. The same sun rising, the same moon pulling at the seas, the same stars shining in the night. And so the Jurassic sky was not just a backdrop but a character in the story, a presence that influenced every moment, every life, every adaptation. It was a sky of brilliance and fury, of storms and calm, of light and shadow. It was a reminder that the Earth is not isolated but part of a larger cosmos, that the rhythms of life are tied not only to soil and water but to the heavens above. To imagine that sky is to imagine a world both alien and familiar, a world where the same stars that shine on us shone on the giants, where the same moon that pulls our tides pulled theirs, where the same sun that warms our days warmed theirs. It is to feel the continuity of existence, the unbroken thread that connects us to a time when the world was young, when the sky turned black with ash, when storms swept across endless forests, when life, as it always has, endured beneath the turning heavens. The sky above the Jurassic world was not merely a backdrop but a living presence, a canvas of light and shadow that shaped the rhythms of every creature below. The sun, warmer and more constant than in later ages, poured its energy into forests and seas, driving the growth of plants and fueling the abundance of life. Clouds gathered in towering forms, heavy with moisture, their shadows sweeping across plains where herds of dinosaurs moved in slow procession. When storms came, they came with force, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rolling across valleys, rain falling in sheets that turned rivers into torrents. Yet when the storms passed, the air was fresh, the forests glistened, and the cycle of growth began anew. Above it all, the moon hung closer than it does today, its pull on the ocean stronger, its glow brighter in the night. Tides rose higher, reshaping coastlines, creating lagoons and estuaries where life flourished. To stand on a Jurassic shore at night would be to see the moon reflected in waters alive with movement, to hear the calls of creatures carried on the wind, to feel the planet itself breathing in rhythm with the heavens. The stars too told their stories. Constellations familiar to us were shifted, their positions altered by the slow drift of time, yet their light still pierced the darkness, guiding migrations, marking the passage of seasons. For the creatures of the Jurassic, the stars were not symbols but silent companions, their presence constant, their influence subtle. The night sky was brighter then, less veiled by atmosphere, more immediate in its clarity. To look upward was to see eternity, to feel the vastness of time stretching beyond comprehension. And beneath that sky, life continued its endless cycles, each creature unaware of the cosmic stage upon which it played its part. The interplay between sky and earth was constant. The warmth of the sun drove photosynthesis, feeding the forests that sustained the giants. The pull of the moon shaped the tides that nourished the seas. The storms redistributed water, carving rivers, filling lakes, renewing soils. Even the volcanic eruptions that darkened the skies for months or years were part of this dialogue, their ash enriching the land, their gases altering the climate, their fire both destructive and creative. The sky was not separate from the earth but part of it, a partner in the shaping of landscapes, a force that guided the rhythms of life. For the creatures of the Jurassic, these rhythms were everything. Dinosaurs rose with the sun, fed in the warmth of day, rested in the cool of evening. Pterosaurs soared on thermals created by the sun's heat, their wings stretched wide against the blue. Nocturnal hunters prowled under the moon, their senses tuned to the faintest sound, their movements guided by starlight. The cycles of light and dark, of storm and calm, of warmth and coolness, were the framework within which life unfolded. To them, it was not extraordinary. It was simply the way of the world. To us, it is a reminder that even in an age so distant, the same forces that shape our lives today were at work. The same sun rising, the same moon pulling at the seas, the same stars shining in the night. And so the Jurassic sky was not just a backdrop but a character in the story, a presence that influenced every moment, every life, every adaptation. It was a sky of brilliance and fury, of storms and calm, of light and shadow. It was a reminder that the Earth is not isolated but part of a larger cosmos, that the rhythms of life are tied not only to soil and water but to the heavens above. To imagine that sky is to imagine a world both alien and familiar, a world where the same stars that shine on us shone on the giants, where the same moon that pulls our tides pulled theirs, where the same sun that warms our days warmed theirs. It is to feel the continuity of existence, the unbroken thread that connects us to a time when the world was young, when the sky turned black with ash, when storms swept across endless forests, when life, as it always has, endured beneath the turning heavens. The rivers and lakes of the Jurassic were lifelines that stitched together the fabric of the land, carrying nutrients from volcanic soils into valleys, feeding forests, and sustaining creatures both great and small. To follow the course of a Jurassic river would be to trace the pulse of the age itself. At its headwaters, rain from monsoon storms poured down from mountains newly raised by tectonic shifts, carving gullies and channels into soft stone. The water ran fast, foaming white, carrying with it fragments of rock and ash, minerals that would enrich the plains below. As the river widened, its pace slowed, and its banks grew lush with horsetails and ferns, their roots binding the soil, their stems rising in dense stands that swayed with the current. Amphibians lurked in the shallows, their eyes just above the surface, their calls echoing at dusk. Crocodile-like reptiles basked on muddy shores, their armored bodies blending with the earth, their patience endless as they waited for prey to approach. Further downstream, the river broadened into lakes, their surfaces mirrors of the sky, their depths alive with movement. Fish darted in schools, flashing silver as they turned in unison, while turtles paddled slowly, their shells patterned with ridges that caught the light. Insects skimmed the surface, their wings leaving ripples that spread outward in perfect circles. Above, pterosaurs swooped low, their jaws snapping shut on unsuspecting fish, their wings casting fleeting shadows across the water. The lakes were not silent. They were alive with sound. The splash of a reptile entering the water, the chorus of amphibians at night, the hum of insects in the humid air. These bodies of water were more than habitats. They were crossroads, places where land and sky and water met, where creatures from every realm came together, drawn by the promise of sustenance. And the depths of these lakes, stranger forms thrived. Long-bodied reptiles with needle-like teeth hunted in the gloom, their movements swift and precise. Small mammals crept to the water's edge to drink, their sharp noses twitching, their ears alert for danger. Dinosaurs too came to these waters, their massive forms bending low to drink, their reflections rippling across the surface. Some waded into the shallows, their tails swaying, their feet stirring mud, their presence a reminder that even the giants depended on the same lifelines as the smallest creatures. The rivers and lakes were equalizers, places where predator and prey alike gathered, where survival depended not on size but on awareness, on timing, on the ability to read the rhythms of the water. The cycles of these waters were as ancient as the earth itself. In the wet season, rivers swelled, flooding plains, depositing rich layers of silt that fed forests and fields of ferns. In the dry season, waters receded, leaving behind oxbow lakes and marshes, their surfaces thick with algae, their margins alive with insects and amphibians. Fires sometimes swept through the dry undergrowth, their smoke rising into the sky, their heat clearing space for new growth. When the rains returned, the cycle began again, the rivers swelling, the lakes filling. The rivers and lakes of the Jurassic were lifelines that stitched together the fabric of the land, carrying nutrients from volcanic soils into valleys, feeding forests, and sustaining creatures both great and small. To follow the course of a Jurassic river would be to trace the pulse of the age itself. At its headwaters, rain from monsoon storms poured down from mountains newly raised by tectonic shifts, carving gullies and channels into soft stone. The water ran fast, foaming white, carrying with it fragments of rock and ash, minerals that would enrich the plains below. As the river widened, its pace slowed, and its banks grew lush with horsetails and ferns, their roots binding the soil, their stems rising in dense stands that swayed with the current. Amphibians lurked in the shallows, their eyes just above the surface, their calls echoing at dusk. Crocodile-like reptiles basked on muddy shores, their armored bodies blending with the earth, their patience endless as they waited for prey to approach. Further downstream, the river broadened into lakes, their surfaces mirrors of the sky, their depths alive with movement. Fish darted in schools, flashing silver as they turned in unison, while turtles paddled slowly, their shells patterned with ridges that caught the light. Insects skimmed the surface, their wings leaving ripples that spread outward in perfect circles. Above, pterosaurs swooped low, their jaws snapping shut on unsuspecting fish, their wings casting fleeting shadows across the water. The lakes were not silent. They were alive with sound. The splash of a reptile entering the water, the chorus of amphibians at night, the hum of insects in the humid air. These bodies of water were more than habitats. They were crossroads, places where land and sky and water met, where creatures from every realm came together, drawn by the promise of sustenance. And the depths of these lakes, stranger forms thrived. Long-bodied, the final chapters of the Jurassic Period unfolded not with sudden catastrophe but with slow, inexorable change, a transformation written across millions of years in the shifting of continents, the rise and fall of seas, the evolution of life itself. To imagine the end of this age is to imagine a world in motion, a world where the familiar rhythms of day and night, of storm and calm, of predator and prey continued, but beneath them deeper forces were at work, reshaping the stage upon which life played its endless drama. The supercontinent that had once dominated the Earth was now fractured, its pieces drifting apart, carried by the restless movement of tectonic plates. The Atlantic Ocean widened, its waters pushing between the separating masses of land, creating new coastlines, new habitats, new opportunities for life to expand. Where once there had been vast interiors of desert, now there were shores, lagoons, and shallow seas, places where ecosystems flourished in abundance. The Earth itself was restless, and in its restlessness lay the seeds of the future. The climate of the late Jurassic remained warm, a greenhouse world without polar ice, but it was not static. Shifts in ocean currents, in volcanic activity, in atmospheric composition brought cycles of change, testing the resilience of life. Forests of conifers, cycads, and ferns still dominated the land, their green canopies stretching across continents. But within them, new forms of plants were beginning to appear, subtle experiments in evolution that hinted at the flowering plants yet to come. The air was still heavy with moisture, the rain still fell in monsoon cycles, the storms still swept across plains and valleys, but the balance was shifting, the stage being set for the next act in Earth's story. The giants of the Jurassic still roamed, their presence shaping the landscapes they inhabited. Sauropods, immense and graceful, moved in herds across floodplains, their necks sweeping through the canopy, their tails swinging like living whips. Stegosaurs grazed in forests, their plates catching the light, their tails armed with spikes. Predators stalked them, great theropods whose teeth and claws were honed by countless generations of survival. The skies were alive with pterosaurs, their wings casting fleeting shadows, their cries echoing across the land. The seas were alive with ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, their sleek bodies cutting through currents, their presence shaping the balance of marine ecosystems. It was still a world of abundance, of resilience, of life in endless motion. And yet, beneath this abundance, change was constant. Some lineages flourished, others declined. The ichthyosaurs, once dominant in the seas, began to wane, their numbers dwindling as new competitors rose. New groups of dinosaurs appeared, their forms more specialized, their adaptations more refined. Small feathered dinosaurs, precursors of birds, spread across forests, their wings carrying them into new niches, their calls adding new notes to the chorus of life. Mammals, still small and often hidden, diversified quietly, their sharp senses and adaptable bodies preparing them for futures they could not yet imagine. The balance of ecosystems shifted subtly, each change a step toward the world that would follow. The end of the Jurassic was not marked by a single event, but by a series of transitions, each one reshaping the possibilities of life. Volcanic eruptions darkened skies, their ash falling across forests, their gases altering climates. Seas rose and fell, flooding plains, retreating, leaving behind layers of sediment that preserved the traces of creatures long vanished. Mountains rose, their peaks catching clouds, their slopes feeding rivers that carved valleys and carried nutrients to the sea. The earth was dynamic, its surface never still, its changes both destructive and creative. Life responded, adapted, endured. To imagine the final nights of the Jurassic is to imagine a world both familiar and strange. The stars shone above, the same stars that shine on us, though shifted slightly by the slow drift of time. The moon hung closer, its pull on the tide stronger, its glow brighter. The forests whispered with the movements of creatures, the calls of dinosaurs echoing in the dark, the hum of insects constant in the background. Rivers flowed, storms passed, the rhythms of life continued. And yet, within those rhythms, the seeds of change were already sown. The Jurassic was ending, not with silence but with transformation, not with destruction but with renewal. The creatures of that age did not know they were living in its final chapters. To them, life was simply life, each day a continuation of the last, each night a preparation for the next. They did not know that their world was shifting, that new forms of life were rising, that the age of the Jurassic was giving way to the age of the Cretaceous. They lived as all creatures live, within the conditions given to them, adapting, enduring, seeking food, seeking shelter, seeking to survive. And in their survival, they carried forward the story of life, a story that would continue long after the Jurassic had passed into memory. The end of the Jurassic was not an end at all but a transition, a turning of the page in the book of Earth's history. It was a reminder that every age, no matter how vast, is temporary, that change is the only constant, that life endures not by resisting change but by embracing it, by adapting, by finding new ways to thrive. The forests of the Jurassic gave way to new forms of vegetation, the giants gave way to new lineages, the seas gave way to new dominions. And yet the rhythms remained. The sun rose and set, the rains came and went, the stars filled the night sky, and life, in all its forms, continued. To reflect on the end of the Jurassic is to reflect on the resilience of life, on the continuity of existence, on the unbroken thread that connects us to that distant age. The creatures of the Jurassic are gone, their bones preserved in stone, their forms reconstructed in our imaginations, their presence remembered in the layers of the earth. But the patterns they lived by, the cycles they followed, the rhythms they embodied, are still with us. We too live within the turning of the earth, within the rise and fall of seasons, within the balance of life and death, within the endless persistence of existence. The Jurassic may have ended, but its legacy endures, written in stone, in sky, in the very fabric of life itself. And so the final chapter closes, not with silence but with continuity, not with loss but with transformation. The age of the Jurassic passes into the age of the Cretaceous. The story of life continues. The earth turns, the heavens wheel, and beneath them life, fragile and resilient, endures. To imagine the end of the Jurassic is to imagine not an ending but a beginning, not a loss but a renewal, not a silence but a song that continues, carried forward by every creature, every leaf, every drop of water, every breath of air. It is to imagine the persistence of life beneath the turning heavens, the endless resilience of existence, the unbroken thread that binds past to present, present to future, future to eternity. Early humans, the cave dwellers who emerged long after the age of the dinosaurs, lived lives that were both fragile and resilient, bound to the rhythms of nature in ways that modern people can scarcely imagine. Their world was one of constant negotiation with the environment, a dialogue between survival and meaning, between hunger and hope. To step into their lives is to step into a time when fire was a miracle, when stone was the sharpest edge, when every day was a test of endurance and every night a gathering of memory. They lived in small bands, families and kin groups bound together by necessity, for no one could survive alone. Cooperation was not a choice but the foundation of existence. Together they hunted, together they gathered, together they raised children and cared for the sick and the old. Around the fire, they shared food, warmth, and stories, weaving a collective identity that gave shape to their days. The fire was more than heat. It was protection against predators, a tool for cooking, a source of light in the darkness, and a symbol of continuity. To keep the fire alive was to keep the community alive, and so it was guarded, fed, and revered. Their relationship with animals was complex, layered with both reverence and necessity. The great herds of bison, reindeer, and mammoths were sources of food, clothing, and tools, but they were also beings with spirits, creatures that demanded respect. When a hunt was successful, nothing was wasted. Meat was shared among the group. Hides were scraped and sewn into clothing. Bones were shaped into needles, awls, and spear points. Sinews were twisted into cords, and fat was burned for light. In this way, the animal lived on in many forms, its presence woven into the daily life of the people. To hunt was not only to take life, but to enter into a relationship, a cycle of giving and receiving that was acknowledged in ritual and art. On the walls of caves, they painted the forms of animals: horses galloping, bison charging, mammoths looming. Images alive with motion and power. These were not idle decorations but acts of connection, ways of honoring the creatures upon which they depended, ways of calling their spirits into the circle of human life. Predators were both threat and teacher. Wolves prowled the edges of camps, their eyes glowing in the firelight, their howls echoing through the night. Bears claimed caves as their dens, forcing humans to negotiate for shelter. Big cats stalked the same prey, their stealth and strength unmatched. Yet from these encounters came lessons in vigilance, in strategy, in respect for the balance of power. Over time, some wolves drew closer, scavenging scraps, learning to live alongside humans, and in this tentative partnership lay the seeds of domestication, the first steps toward a bond that would reshape the future of both species. The landscape itself was alive with meaning. Rivers were lifelines, carrying fish and waterfowl, shaping migration routes, offering places to drink and to gather reeds and plants. Forests provided wood for fire, berries and nuts for food, and shelter from the wind. Mountains loomed as boundaries and markers, their peaks touching the sky, their caves offering refuge. The sky above was a constant presence, the sun marking the days, the moon guiding the tides and the rhythms of animals, the stars forming patterns that became stories, guides, and mysteries. To live in such a world was to be immersed in cycles, to feel the turning of seasons not as abstractions but as forces that determine survival. Within the community, roles were shared and fluid. Hunters tracked animals across vast distances, reading the ground for signs, listening for the faintest sound, watching the movements of birds and the direction of the wind. Gatherers knew the plants, which healed, which nourished, which poisoned. Toolmakers shaped stone with patience, striking flakes from flint, crafting blades sharper than steel, hafting them onto wooden shafts with sinew and resin. Storytellers carried the memory of the group, recounting hunts, disasters, migrations, and dreams. Elders offered wisdom, children carried the future, and every member was part of the whole. To be human in this time was to be part of a web of relationships, each thread essential, each life bound to the others. At a tea night, when the fire crackled and shadows danced on cave walls, the people told stories. Some were of hunts and heroes, of animals and spirits, of ancestors and gods. Others were of the stars, of the patterns they traced, of the mysteries they held. These stories were not entertainment alone. They were education, memory, and ritual. They taught children how to live, how to respect the world, how to find meaning in hardship. They bound the group together, giving them a shared identity, a sense of belonging in a vast and often hostile world. The relationship between humans and nature was not one of domination but of negotiation. They did not see themselves as separate from the world but as part of it, woven into its cycles, dependent upon its gifts, vulnerable to its dangers. Every hunt, every harvest, every fire was a reminder of this connection. They lived with humility, with awareness, with gratitude, because they knew that survival was never guaranteed, that life was fragile, that the balance could shift with a storm, a drought, a failed hunt. And yet, within this fragility was resilience. They adapted, they endured, they found ways to thrive in environments that tested them at every turn. To imagine their lives is to imagine a world both harsh and beautiful, a world where every day was a challenge but also a gift, where every creature, every plant, every stone had meaning. It is to imagine a time when the boundaries between human and animal, between nature and spirit, between survival and meaning, were fluid, shifting, alive. It is to imagine a humanity at once vulnerable and powerful, fragile and enduring, small in the face of the cosmos yet vast in imagination and resilience. And as we reflect on their world, we see not only how far we have come, but how deeply we remain connected to the same cycles, the same rhythms, the same turning heavens that guided their lives.